Hello everyone. So today we're going to be talking about the constant of proportionality, going along with what we did recently with proportional relationships. So in every proportional relationship, we can find the constant of proportionality. Um, so as we see here in this definition, two proportional relationships, x and y, are related by a common multiple, right? So a number we multiply x by to get y, or the constant of proportionality. That's another word for the constant of proportionality, which we're going to call k. Okay, k is that constant of proportionality. K is the ratio of y to x for proportional relationships. So when we were checking whether we had a proportional relationship, we found that ratio y to x for every single pair of values for x and y. And if we got the same value every time, we said we had a proportional relationship. We had equivalent ratios. And now we're just kind of giving that ratio, y divided by x, a special name. That's called the constant of proportionality. And we're going to be able to use it to write equations in this form of y equals k times x. Okay, so let's dive into our first example. So for our first example, they're telling us to find the constant of proportionality for the proportional quantities between the number of nachos ordered, x, and the total cost at a concession stand, y. Then write an equation that represents the situation and use it to find the cost if Miss Teliotis buys 7 orders of nachos. Okay, so there's a lot going on there. But the first thing they tell me to do is to find the constant of proportionality. And again, I know that the constant of proportionality, which we often call k, right, that's going to be equal to the ratio of y divided by x. Okay, so let's go to our table and try to figure that out. Right, so we zoomed in, we added that third column for y divided by x, and we're going to do just like what we did yesterday. Now, they already told us this is a proportional relationship, so we don't necessarily need to check all of them, but I'm going to do it just to be safe, because that's a good thing to do. Okay, so y, the cost, the amount of money I'm paying for my nachos, it's $6 if I buy 2 nachos. And I can keep going here. If I buy 3 nachos, it's going to cost $9, so I can find that constant of proportionality by doing 9 divided by 3. Do the same thing here. If I buy 4 nachos, it's going to cost $12, so I can do 12 divided by 4, y divided by x. And lastly, if I buy 11 nachos, it's going to cost $33. So I'm going to do 33, my y value, divided by x, 11, my x value. Okay, and since we have a proportional relationship, that means all these values have to be the same, and they're going to lead to our constant of proportionality. Okay, so what is 6 divided by 2? 6 divided by 2 is 3, right? 9 divided by 3 is 3. 12 divided by 4 is 3. And 33 divided by 11 is 3. And now we've just found k, our constant of proportionality. So this means that k, right here we see k is equal to y divided by x, y divided by x, y divided by x. K is equal to 3. Before we keep going, let's just see another way we could have seen that in the table. So if I look here, 2 times 3, that's going to give me 6. And then again, 3 times 3 equals 9. 4 times 3 equals 12. And 11 times 3 equals 33. Right? So that's what a constant of proportionality is. It's this constant multiple that I can find by dividing y by x. But it's how am I getting from x to y? What am I multiplying by? Alright, great. So that's my constant of proportionality. Step number 1, check. Then they're saying, then write an equation that represents the situation. So next we're going to write an equation that represents the situation. So looking at my notes again, we wrote then you can represent a proportional relationship using the equation y equals k times x. So y equals k times x is going to be an equation that represents the situation. So what is k? What did we just figure out k is? K is our constant of proportionality, and we just determined right here that k is equal to 3. So to write an equation, all I have to do is substitute in, or just like that's another way of saying, a good math way of saying replace. We just need to replace k with 3. Where we see k, substitute in 3 because k is equal to 3. Okay, so this equation is my equation that represents the situation. And now we can use that to find the cost for how much it's going to cost if I buy 7 nachos. But before I do that, let me make sure we get why that equation makes sense. What this equation says is that the y value is going to be equal to 3 times my x value. And I can figure out my purple, my y value, by multiplying the green, the x, times my constant of proportionality 3 every single time. So that's why that's an equation that represents it. Great. And then we have our last step, which they're saying use it to find the cost if Miss Deliotis buys 7 order of nachos. Okay, so if I go back to my table, did x or y represent the number of nachos? Because x is that number of nachos. Okay, so that means it's going to be like in the green spot in the x position. So I have 7. Well, how am I going to figure out the cost? I'm going to do 7 times 3 times my constant of proportionality, and that's going to give me the total number. Before I do that in the table, though, let's do that in equation, because this is important. It's an important skill. Even if you already have the answer in your head, which is awesome, it's important to understand how we could write this out. Okay, so I have my constant proportionality is 3. That's not going to change, ever. Never going to change. And then I need to multiply by the number of nachos, x. Well, in this case, we just found out that when we're talking about 7 orders of nachos, x is 7. So where I have x, I'm going to replace it with 7. And I put it in parentheses because that's going to represent multiplication. And then what is 3 times 7? Equal 21. Okay, so that's what's going to go here. If I buy 7 nachos, then the total cost is going to be $21. So it will cost Miss Deliotis $21 to buy 7 nachos. So all of those things are important. Something that I'm going to emphasize here, because the numbers were kind of easy, is I believe you could have gotten this answer maybe without doing all the steps. But all these steps are really important. They're building you up to some of the strong, more challenging algebraic skills. One thing I want to talk about is what did this constant of proportionality mean in this problem? So I found that my k was 3. And I got that by dividing my y, the total cost, by x, the number of nachos. So if I were to have a unit for 3, that would mean like $3 per 1 nacho, right? I could add that onto my list here. If I had 1 nacho, that's going to cost $3. So that's going to be a special thing about the constant proportionality is it's actually representing your unit rate. It's the cost per one thing. All right, now we have some shorter examples for example 2 and 3. So for example 2, which equation represents a proportional relationship, A, B, or C? So we remember that from an equation, every proportional relationship has that form y equals k times x. Because what we know is the relationship between x and y can be found by just some constant multiple. So looking at A, B, and C, which of those is in the form of y equals some number k, we don't know what it is, but it's going to be a number, times x, and that's it. Well, if I look at A, I have y equals 0.5x minus 2. Okay, so that is not a proportional relationship. No. If I look here, if I just had y equals 0.5x, that would be great. That's a proportional relationship. But the second we add in this negative 2, that's a problem, right? Because that's not part of the form. That means to get from x and y, we don't just multiply. We have to do some subtracting as well. That means we don't have a proportional relationship. All right, let's look at B then. Y equals negative 1,000 times x. So to get y from x, we take x and we multiply by negative 1,000. Is that a constant multiple? Does that look like this? Y equals some number times x? Yeah? Yep, so that's going to be our answer. B is going to be our answer. Great, and then we look at C just to make sure we know that one is wrong. We have C equals x plus 1. Right, we can't have plus 1. Then we are, just like we couldn't have this minus 2, you can't have anything else besides multiplying. So that's why C is wrong. Okay, so just looking at the equations, if it's in this form, y equals k times x, we know it's a constant. It's a proportional relationship. And the constant of proportionality in B, a negative 1,000 is our constant. All right, great. Now let's look at example 3. Half dozen cupcakes cost $15. What constant proportionality relates the number of cupcakes and their total cost? Write an equation that represents the scenario. Okay, so they didn't give us a table, but we do have all the information we need. So first thing we need to do is let's figure out what is x and y here. We have two quantities, the number of cupcakes and the total cost. So remember in my previous videos, when we think about our x value, that's going to be the independent variable. That's going to be something we kind of choose or have control over. So when I go shopping, I can choose how much I buy. So I control the number of cupcakes. That's going to be x. And then y is going to be that total cost. It's the dependent variable. It depends on how many cupcakes I buy. We're just going to make a table of 1. Right, one row and one column. So let's just fill in the missing pieces there then. A half a dozen cupcakes cost $15. So my cost, again, the total cost is y. So 15 is going to be my y value. And then half a dozen cupcakes. That is 6. So a dozen is 12. And then half of 12 is 6. So we have 6 cupcakes, cost $15. What is the constant of proportionality? Well, we can find that constant of proportionality always, right, by finding our y and dividing by our x. Cool. So my y value is 15, and my x value is 6, so I'm going to do 15 divided by 6. And what is 15 divided by 6? That's going to be equal to 2.5 or 2.5. So that is equal to k, because k is the ratio of y divided by x. So k equals 2.5. All right, and now we just need to write an equation. So the general form of an equation is going to be y is equal to my constant of proportionality k times x. And for this, we keep the y, we keep the variable. Y is equal to 2.5 times x. That our constant of proportionality is k, is 2.5. So that means wherever I see k in my equation, I can substitute in 2.5. Because it's a constant, it is always 2.5. And if you need to check that yourself, right, you can do 6 times 2.5, and you will get 15, right, because that's what it means. That's our constant multiple. Okay, so there we go. There we have it. Okay, great job, everyone.